Hello everyone, I am Gonzalo Ferrada from the University of Iowa, and today I will talk about testing a new method to expand existing biomass burning inventories to include multiple non-methane organic compounds and how they can improve model simulations. Our collaborators at the Argonne National Lab have developed a full methodology to derive non-methane organic compounds, or NMOCs. The method consists in taking the dry biomass burn report by any existing biomass burning inventory, such as QFED, GFED, or FIN, and using emission factors from literature, we are able to derive multiple species that can also be lumped together to be used with different chemical mechanisms in models. This is an example of this method. This figure summarizes the compilation of different emission factors from literature and how do we group them. We have these categorizations for different biomes, and the example here showed savannas and grasslands, but we also have classifications for tropical, temperate, and boreal forests, peatlands, and agricultural fires. These developments can sound very good in theory, but it is necessary to find a way to evaluate them. In this case, the Firex AGU field experiment that happened during the summer 2019 is a great opportunity to do this evaluation. During this campaign, they used the DC-8 and the ER2 planes with multiple instruments that measured hundreds of species that can be used to evaluate our derived hydrocarbons, or NMOCs. We decided to run simulations using WorfChem during a period overlapping with the Firex AGU campaign. We ran two simulations at 2.5 kilometers resolution, one with the regular QFED emissions, which we named QFED, and the other with the enhanced NMOCs, which we call NMOCs for simplicity. You can see the common model setup in the table. Here you can see a set of time series that show the daily total biomass burning emissions of selected species that we use in each simulation. The dark colors represent the QFED emissions, and the light colors are the enhanced NMOCs. In summary, we include slightly higher emissions for CO and much higher emissions of other hydrocarbons compared to QFED. We compared our simulations results with three DC-8 flights, first focusing on CO to see if the model reproduces the general characteristics of the plume. In the top left, you see a three-dimensional view of the flight track, and in the bottom, the model CO at 600 millibars, overlaid by the flight track. The figure in the top right is a comparison of CO from the DC-8 with our two sensitivity simulations along the flight track. Note that the scales are logarithmic, and you can also see the flight altitude in the right axis. The areas in gray do not contain model data since they are parts of the track that lie outside of our domain boundaries. From this figure, we see that both simulations reproduce the plume location accurately, but they differ in the concentration values. The major discrepancies happen in the sections where the plane did a zigzag through the plume, and the model struggles to get the rapid increases and decreases in CO concentration in these areas. This is better appreciated in the figure in the bottom, which is an along track view of CO from the model, and the dots represent the observations from the DC-8. They use the same color scale, so when you see the contrast between the dots and the curtain, it means that there is a bias from the model. But in general, the model reproduces the plume locations pretty well. For the flight conducted on the 7th of August, we observed almost the same model's behavior, with the major discrepancies happen in the zigzag track of the plane through the fresh plume. The figure in the bottom shows how the model reproduces the plume, which is more active than the day before. You can see that the major biases occur mostly in the edges of the plume, which make us think that the model does not locate the plume completely accurate. This highlights the need for an assessment of the plume location from the model. For example, if the plume is not well located, or if it's reproduced in the model a few kilometers displaced to the north and in reality, then our biases are going to be high. A way that we are thinking to account for this is using LiDAR data from the DC-8 to be able to relocate the plume from the model in order to have a fair comparison. The flight on the 8th of August was different than the previous two. Here the plane flew very high over the fresh plume, almost always about 7 kilometers, so most of the local CO observations are below 100 ppb. Here we notice that the background CO from the model has a negative bias, and this is possibly due to the upper boundary conditions that usually begin affecting the model at these altitudes. We also know that this day was the development of the pyrrhus B of the Williams Flat Fire, and as seen in other presentations, the fire had a very particular diurnal cycle that is not captured by the fixed distribution of emissions throughout the day that we use in the model, which can lead to biases. This slide summarizes our preliminary results of the 3 flights using different species. Here you see a composite of observations versus the QFET simulation in the top and the NMOC simulation in the bottom. The changes in CO are little, and we expected that because the CO derivation from our method increases it slightly. But you can see that the formaldehyde in orange gave slightly better results in the NMOC simulation. Ozone showed little change, but ozone is not a direct indicative of the plume, and it is more difficult to evaluate it since its formation depends on several different factors. We also compared the two simulations together, and you can see that across the flight tracks, the NMOC simulations include more formaldehyde and produces more ozone than the QFET simulation. However, this selected species may not be counting the whole story, so we are working in an evaluation of multiple hydrocarbons. In the next 3 slides, we will show the results comparing both sensitivity simulations based on the average fields during the period of simulations from 6 to 10 August. Here you can see carbon monoxide, ozone, and PM2.5 at the surface level. The QFET simulation in the left, the NMOC simulation is in the middle, and the absolute difference between them is in the right. You can see that the NMOC simulation shows higher concentration of the 3 species. In the location of the Williams Flat Fire, you see the higher increases in these variables, going up to more than 200 ppb of CO and increasing more than 20 ppb of formation of ozone and also more particulate matter. Here you see the same 3 species as in the slide before, but now you see their column integrated values, which show that the increasing concentration of hydrocarbons is not only visible in the surface, but throughout the whole troposphere. It is important to note that for ozone here, we show only values from surface up to 500 millibars to avoid accounting for stratospheric ozone. Perhaps a better way to see the increase on hydrocarbon species and all its derivatives is shown here with cross-sections from surface to 10 kilometers altitude at 48 degrees north. This latitude is the approximate location of the Williams Flat Fire. Here we also include formaldehyde in our analysis, and results show that all hydrocarbon species have an increase in the NMOC simulation, as in the previous slides also showed. Even though these are 5-day average composites, you still can notice clearly the smoke plume from the fire. For example, in the older part of the plume, you notice a net increase in ozone production. In our conclusions, we would like to summarize this work and our preliminary results. So we have developed a method to derive multiple non-methane organic compounds from biomass burning using different emission factors from literature. These NMOCs can be applied to different emission inventories, such as QFET, GFET, or FIN, and can be prepared for different chemistry mechanisms included in models. In our case, we prepared our emissions for Mozart. Our sensitivity simulations made with QFET and the enhanced NMOCs show that the NMOCs case increases all hydrocarbon species included in Mozart, and also produces more particulate matter and tropospheric ozone formation. We further compared both simulations with some species measured with the DC-8. In general, there is a slight improvement in emissions in the NMOC simulation. However, we need to develop a fairer way to compare the models since sometimes the fire locations can be shifted due to the grading of emissions. We also want to mention that we are currently working in simulations for the whole continental US that will cover the Fire AGU campaign in full. We will make an extensive analysis of our emissions using all the flights conducted during fire AGU, extending our evaluation to multiple species and not only CO, formaldehyde, and ozone, as shown here. Thanks for your attention, and if you have questions, please come to our discussion session scheduled for December 17th.